I realized late in life that I was lucky to have Mrs. Vreeland and my grandmother. And there were so many similarities about them which made me write my first memoir. Mrs. Vreeland and my grandmother, the same personality, except that Mrs. Vreeland came from the world of aristocrats and luxury in Paris, and my grandmother was a simple maid. But there were so many similarities. They both believed in impeccable cleanliness, grooming, dignity, polish. Mrs. Vreeland had people polishing the soles of her shoes. She had young students who come over to her apartment on Saturdays, tall young men, to catalog her library, her books, to dust and polish the books, dust off the book spines. My grandmother had a Samsonite set of luggage that she loved, and when we'd go to New York, she would pack them, each layers packed with tissue paper from Woolworth to Five and Dime. And as I became closer to Mrs. Vreeland, I realized my grandmother and Mrs. Vreeland were the same. One of the things associated with Mrs. Vreeland was hair, the importance of the hair, the coiffure of the hairdresser. My grandmother never, ever washed her hair when she was an adult. She always went to the hairdresser. Always. Every 2 weeks. She went to the hairdresser. Mrs. Vreeland went to the hairdresser every week when she was active. She would go to Kenneth in New York once a week for the comb out shampoo or the dye, which was flown in from Paris. So going to the hairdresser was paramount to both women. My grandmother never washed her hair in the hair sink, and she always had impeccable hair. Then my grandmother had beautiful things, very few, the things that she could afford, but she bought the best, and they were with her forever. She bought the best shoes that were in Durham at the time. There was no sense of luxury. There was no couture. My grandmother did not know anything about couture, but the values of my grandmother, Mrs. Vreeland, were the same. Cleanliness, scrub the floor, polish, polish. Mrs. Vreeland was always about polish, polish. Now, she was not doing the polishing, of course. But my grandmother was about polish, and she made me wax the floors with Johnson's paste wax. I had to polish those floors, and she would inspect them. So these two people were very similar, and they both gave me unconditional love. So that's why I was so close to Mrs. Vreeland, and because of my grandmother. Unconditional love.